Good morning. I'll play this for you. Enjoy the stream. And I'll let this play for you.
All right, so we ready for the jury? Yes. Okay. All right, be seated. Your next witness?
We call Ron Schnell.
Okay, Schnell.
Schnell.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case and penalty of law?
Yes.
All right.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
I'm Ron Schnell.
And what is your current job title, Mr. Schnell?
I'm a director at Berkely Research Group.
And could you briefly describe your educational background since high school?
I have a master's degree in computer science.
Do you have an undergraduate degree?
I do not.
And can you explain to the jury why not?
When I was a kid, there was a lot of publicity about me because I was a professor at NYU. When I was 14, NYU actually offered me to go into their freshman class when I was 14, but I decided that I wanted to experience the social aspect of high school, so I turned them down, but by the time I got to college, they skipped me from undergraduate to graduate.
So when did you receive your master's degree from Syracuse University?
It wasn't until 2008, actually.
And why wasn't it until 2008?
So because of my previous background while I was at Syracuse, including I did work at MIT in the artificial intelligence lab for the two founders of artificial intelligence, Patrick Winston and Marvin Minsky. I was immediately lured to industry even while I was in graduate school, and eventually they offer you enough money where you have to take them up on it.
So when you were lured away from Syracuse University, what did you do?
I worked at Bell Labs on something called the Unix operating system. Unix is an operating system, which is the core of the computer, what makes everything work. Microsoft Windows is an operating system. Mac OS is an operating system. You may have heard of Linux, which is, Unix was the predecessor to Linux. So I worked on the kernel of the Unix operating system at Bell Labs.
And when was that approximately? What year?
1986.
And how long did you work at Bell Labs?
A couple of years.
And what did you do after Bell Labs?
After that, I was lured away to IBM. So I worked at IBM on their version of the Unix operating system, which was called AIX, also working on the kernel and managing other programmers working on the kernel.
And can you just briefly explain what the kernel is?
Right, the kernel is the center of the operating system, so it actually controls the piece of software that controls the whole computer. So it gets down to the bit level where it's actually really, everything that goes on the computer has to go through the kernel.
And what did you do after IBM?
After IBM, I founded a startup company.
What was the name of that startup company?
It was called Secure Online Systems.
And what did Secure Online Systems do?
It was a company that wrote software for mainframe computers running various versions of the Unix operating system.
And were there any other investors in Secure Online Systems, Inc.?
Yeah, my business partner in that was Sylvester Stallone.
And what eventually happened to Secure Online Systems?
Well, it was, as I said, a software product that ran on mainframe computers running Unix. And we actually completed the product and it ran very well, but mainframes running Unix kind of ceased to exist back then, so we had to shut it down.
So what did you do after the company shut down?
Then I went to work at Sun Microsystems, working on their version of Unix, which is called Solaris, also working on the kernel.
And approximately how long were you there at Sun?
Approximately 5 years.
And did you also work for Drivers Aces, Inc.?
Right. Coincident with that, I also founded another startup called Driver Aces, and we wrote what are called device drivers to run on the Unix operating systems. A device driver actually teaches the computer how to talk to hardware devices, so it also runs within the kernel.
Have you founded any other startups?
Yes.
And what was the other startup? What was at least one of the other startups?
So the last startup I founded was called mailcall.com, M-A-I-L, and that was a startup that allowed you to read and manage your email on your cellular phone before there were smartphones. So a computerized voice would read you your email and you could speak a reply into the phone or send it to a fax machine, basically let you manage your email on the road.
And what happened to mailcall.com?
I sold that to a public company in 2000.
And what did you do after that?
After that, I ended up working at Equifax, one of the 3 credit bureaus in the United States, running software development for their internet marketing division.
And how long were you in that position?
Until 2005.
And what happened in 2005?
In 2005, I was asked to run what's called a monitorship for the DC District Court for 2 cases, U.S. versus Microsoft and New York et al. Versus Microsoft, the 2 largest antitrust cases in U.S. history. So I was responsible for running that organization. I hired 93 people over 6.5 years to perform that monitorship.
And what type of work were you doing in that monitorship?
Highly technical work, looking at all of Microsoft's documents and source code and things like that. I can't talk too much about it because of a protective order, but I had special master powers in those matters.
And you said you were in that position for 6.5 years?
Correct.
So that takes us to about 2013, is that right?
It was 11.
2011, okay. And what did you do? What did you do in 2011?
In 2011, I didn't do much until 2013 when I took the role as a director at Berkely Research Group.
Okay, and that's your current position, correct?
Correct.
And what are your responsibilities at Berkely Research Group?
So I do all sorts of things. Generally, I consult. I do software projects and manage software projects and architect them. But I also do things like this, where I'm consulting in litigation and sometimes testifying in litigation.
Have you taught any courses?
Yes, I'm an adjunct professor at Nova Southeastern University.
And what classes do you teach there?
I teach computer security and the Unix operating system environment, although since COVID I haven't been doing that.
And have you published any scholarly articles?
Yes, I have 2 published articles, one related to computer security and another relating to antitrust enforcement using technology.
And what experience do you have in statistical or forensic analysis of social media?
A bunch of the consulting work I've done involves analyzing data from social media. Most of them have been consulting for litigation. Some of them are consulting for non-litigation. Yeah.
And is that work both in civil and criminal matters?
Yes.
And could you describe the work just a bit more in terms of what you've performed regarding statistical or forensic analysis of social media?
I can't talk about the specific cases because I haven't testified on them, and some of them are awaiting indictment, most likely. But in general, it's really the same sort of stuff I've been doing here, analyzing data from the social networks.
And what social media platforms have you performed forensic analysis?
All of the major ones.
What are the major ones?
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit.
How much of your expert work is for plaintiffs versus work for defendants?
Well, I don't consider myself working for either plaintiff or defendant. I take my role as an independent expert extremely seriously. But looking at whose counsel has hired me over the 9 or so years I've been doing this, it's almost exactly equal.
And how many times have you been a consulting expert?
Including litigation and non-litigation, hundreds.
How many times have you been qualified in court, arbitration, or in sworn court testimony to provide expert testimony?
8 times.
Have you ever been disqualified as an expert by a court?
No.
Do you believe that your testimony will be helpful in assisting the jury understand the facts of this case?
I do.
Your Honor, at this time, I tender Mr. Schnell as an expert in the fields of statistical and forensic analysis of social media.
Any objection?
Your Honor, can we be heard?
Do you want to voir dire?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can voir dire.
Thanks. Sir, my name's Wayne Edison. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You made here an analysis of certain tweets and hashtags, right?
Right.
And you made no effort to connect those tweets and hashtags to the statements being made by Adam Waldman.
I'll sustain the objection. The voir dire is just for his qualifications as an expert.
Can we be heard, Your Honor?
If you want to come forward.
Thank you.
That's fine. All right. So, Mr. Dennison, do you have any objection to him moving in as an expert?
No.
All right. Then I'll move him in as an expert in statistical and forensic analysis of social media. Okay? Yes, sir, your question.
Mr. Schnell, what were you asked to do in this matter?
So I was asked to do several things. I used the official Twitter APIs to bring in data over several different time spans. Initially, it was April of 2020 to January of 2021, and analyzed various hashtags and things like that.
And what is significant about April 2020?
I understand that April 2020 is related to the alleged defamatory statements by Mr. Waldman.
And you talked about APIs. What is it? What does that mean?
API stands for Application Programming Interface. That is a service that's provided by companies like Twitter so that professionals can write programs to query Twitter to ask for various things. In this case, I use two of their APIs. One of them is called the Search API, and that allows you to give search terms, and it will return all the tweets containing those search terms through a certain date range. The other one is called Accounts API, and I use that, again, through a certain date range to return any tweet that contained that hashtag. And I should add that it may not be obvious why you need to do this, but if you just do a search on Twitter itself, it's not going to return everything. It's going to return a subset of what is out there. But using these APIs, which you pay a lot of money for, they sort of guarantee that you'll almost guarantee that you'll get everything.
And you mentioned hashtags. I know a lot of people know what those are, but for those who don't know, what's a hashtag?
Well, hashtags are a function of Twitter. They're really just part of the text of a tweet or a profile, and it's convenient to put things in hashtags so that when somebody searches, they can search for a particular hashtag and it'll come up.
And did you choose particular hashtags to search for?
I did.
And how did you choose which hashtags to use?
Well, initially I was looking at tweets that would be negative towards Ms. Heard. So I looked through tweets that were negative towards Ms. Heard, and I found that a supermajority of them were using one of four different hashtags.
And so overall, what did your analysis find regarding negative hashtags about Ms. Heard from April 2020 until the end of January 2021?
Well, there were over 1,243,000 and change uses of those hashtags during that time frame you just mentioned.
And did you perform an analysis of the negative hashtags from April 2020 until January 2022?
Yes, I did.
And what was the result of that?
There were over another million, so 2.38 million, I think.
And how did you determine that the tweets were negative about Ms. Heard?
Well, I hadn't been asked that until later on in this, but I didn't think that would be in controversy. I mean, some of these hashtags are pretty rude, and it would really surprise me that anyone would think that they wouldn't be negative towards Ms. Heard. But when I was asked about it later, I actually took a random sampling and looked at them and could not find any that were not negative towards Ms. Heard.
And what was the random sampling that you used?
I did two of them. They were 1,000 each.
And how did you determine which 1,000 tweets to use to review in each search?
I wrote a program that truly selected them at random.
And in your experience, is 2,000 tweets a meaningful sample?
If they're chosen at random in this universe, yes.
Okay. In addition to the four hashtags for Ms. Heard, did you review any other? Did you look at any other hashtags?
I did.
And what type of hashtags did you look for?
I looked at what I found to be 6 hashtags that would be negative towards Mr. Depp.
Okay, but Michelle, could you put up demonstrative 1, which is on the 5th page of attachment 4 of Mr. Schnell's expert designation. Mr. Schnell, did you create this chart?
I did.
And what data is this chart based on?
This is based on the search API from Twitter, and it rolls up the number of tweets with the various hashtags by month of these 2 years. 3 years.
Your Honor, I'd like to make this a demonstrative Schnell demonstrative 1, or do you want it to be a?
If I could get it one of the numbers, since it's going to be part of the record, just.
Okay. Can we call it Schnell demonstrative 1, and then I will give you a number?
The last number I have is 1837. I don't know.
Do we know if that's the last? Can we make it? How about we make it 1900? That way, it's not Can we just make it 1900?
That's perfect.
Okay.
All right, 1900 it is. Any objections or demonstrative?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can publish that.
And is this the chart you made, Mr. Schnell?
It is.
Okay. And at the top here, there are hashtags that are in yellow. You see that?
I do.
Okay. And if we go all the way to the right, well, first let's scroll over to the left here. I apologize. You see, in 2020, there's the months of June and July.
I do.
Okay. And what are these columns? First, tell the jury what they represent.
So each of these is the number of tweets with the hashtags, with the corresponding hashtag during that month.
Okay. And if we look at the first one in yellow, you see that first hashtag, the fourth one over?
I do.
And are there any, what does it show from 2018, frankly, to July of 2020?
There were none.
And then what happens in August of 2020?
Well, there's a remarkable jump from July to August of 2020. It goes from 0 to 13,878.
And if we scroll to the right, the last three hashtags, which are highlighted, or shows the difference between June and July, what did your analysis show?
Well, you can see that June is about at its steady state. In July, there's also a remarkable jump.
And that's for all three of those hashtags?
That's correct.
Okay. And the hashtags, if the hashtags that are in blue are the ones related to Mr. Depp, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Oh, by the way, what is your understanding of when the last alleged defamatory statement was made by Mr. Depp through Mr. Waldman?
My understanding is that it was the end of June of that year.
Of 2020?
Yes.
Now, looking at the hashtags that are highlighted in blue for Mr. Depp, for the months of November and December of 2018 and January of 2019, what does your analysis show?
Well, I see a remarkable jump in November of 2018, and then it starts to, well, it goes way down in December of 18 and in January of 19.
And do you know when Ms. Heard wrote the op-ed in this matter?
My understanding is that it was December of 2018.
And if we go to November of 2020 for the hashtags related to Mr. Depp, if you see the difference between October of 2020 and November of 2020, what do you see there?
I also see a large jump from October to November of 2020.
Okay. And if we look at the last hashtag in blue that says Johnny Depp is a wife beater, what does that show what did your analysis find in terms of tweets without those hashtags?
It looks to me that also, I mean, there are none prior to, well, little here and there. There are single-digit ones, but prior to November of 2020, there are basically none, and then it jumps up to over 2,000.
And do you know what happened in November of 2020?
My understanding is that's when the UK trial ended.
Okay, we can take this down. And can you put up demonstrative 2, which will make 1901, which will identify as 1901?
That's fine, 1901. Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, 1901 can be published.
And Mr. Banya, what data is this chart based on? Oh, I did the same thing. Mr. Schnell, what data is this chart based on?
This chart is actually based on the data we just looked at, but out until January of 2022. And it's just another way of displaying the numbers in graphical form so that we can see peaks and valleys.
And what are the dotted lines?
So if you look at the top, you can see that the dashed lines are the negative hashtags towards Ms. Heard, and the solid ones are the negative hashtags towards Mr. Depp.
And what is being shown here? In your analysis, what is shown with the tweets related to Ms. Heard?
Well, you can see that there's a huge spike in February of 2020, which I believe Mr. Waldman just testified that that's when he leaked an audio tape of some kind. There's also a notable, remarkable spike in July of 2020, in November of 2020, and then in March of 2021.
And the spike in February 2020, that came before the alleged defamatory statements, correct?
Which one?
The spike in February 2020.
That is correct.
And even though that spike came in before the alleged defamatory statements, even taking account for that spike, what time period has more negative tweets about Ms. Heard, before or after April 2020?
Right. So even taking into account this really large spike in February of 2020, and you look at from the beginning of 2018 until the beginning of 2022, there are a majority of the negative tweets are between April of 2020 through the beginning of 2022.
And do you recall at your deposition being asked that a spike in negative hashtags occurring before April 8th, right before April 8th, 2020?
Objection, hearsay.
I would ask about his attorney.
Overruled. Go ahead.
I remember questions regarding particular dates, yes.
And what's your understanding as to why there was more negative tweets in April 6th and April 7th than April 8th, 2020?
Objection, no foundation.
Was there more negative tweets in April 6th, on April 6th and April 7th than in April 8th, 2020 as it relates to Ms. Heard?
Right. If you look at the day-by-day counts, which I supplied to Mr. Depp, and you can see that there's a spike that begins on April 6th and goes for a few days. So April 6th is, to my understanding, before what people are calling the alleged defamatory statement.
And did you look at the tweets for April 6th and April 7th?
I did.
And what did you find?
I found that there are Waldman statements that are the same as on the 8th, on the 6th, and the 7th. The Daily Mail on the 6th, and Vanity Fair on the 7th.
And what terms were being used?
Well, hoax is certainly used in each of them. I think abuse hoax is used in one of them. I don't have it in front of me, but generally speaking, in the 7th, I think it's the same exact terms that are used in the one on the 8th, but the 6th may be slightly different, but it has the word hoax.
Okay. If we can go to the second page of this demonstrative. What's being shown in the second page of this demonstrative?
So this is it's the same data as the first one, but I've removed one hashtag, the Justice for Johnny Depp hashtag, because it kind of overwhelms all the others because there are so many of them. And by removing it, it sort of rescales the graph, and you can see the others much better. And even though they look really tiny in the previous page, you can see that they're big numbers, over 100,000 and stuff. So this shows, and if you look between the two, you can see that the curves are the same. So it shows like a mathematical correlation between all the hashtags.
So what do you mean by mathematical correlation?
Well, they're correlated. You can see the numbers go up and down at the same place.
So I'm understanding the hashtags are essentially all going up and down at the same times?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. And can we put up demonstrative exhibit 3?
Which one, maybe? 1902?
1902.
That's
Yes,
fine.
thank you.
All right, any objection to 1902?
None as a demonstrative.
Yes. Okay. You can publish that.
Mr. Schnell, did you create this chart?
I did.
And what does this chart show?
So what I did was I took the data that I supplied to Mr. Depp, which was the original data from April of 2020 through January of 2021, and I searched it for certain key terms, specifically hoax, fake, and fraud. That's what it's representing. The top part, anyway.
And the top part, if you look at for hoax, fake, and fraud and this is within the negative hashtags or misheard?
Right. This is only searching through the ones that have one of these 4 hashtags in them.
Okay. And if you look at the total, oops, I'm putting that in black. Let's clear that. Oh, you saw the line there. What's the total number of times it was used in the negative tweets, either hoax, fake, or fraud?
81,121.
And did you perform any other searches on the data?
Yes.
And what searches did you perform?
So I also looked in that same data for references to Waldman by itself, or Wald, and then followed by anything followed by Mignon or Minion, depending how you want to pronounce it, sort of a portmanteau of Waldman and filet mignon, I guess, or minions, and looked for those in the same data.
And in terms of the percentage of the amount of times Waldman or Waldmignon was used in the negative hashtags from April 2020 through, is it January 2021?
The percent?
Yeah, what's the percentage?
Yeah, so I found over 25% of the negative hashtag tweets, or 1 out of every 4 on average, had either Waldman or Waldmignon.
And I see you ran searches for hoax, fake, fraud, rather than abuse hoax in quotes or sexual violence hoax in quotes. Why didn't you run those searches?
Objection compound.
Overruled.
So so if I put them in quotes like that, say abuse hoax in quotes, that would require that it show up in exactly that way, with the same spacing and the same order. So if it said something like there was abuse and there was a hoax, it wouldn't get caught. So if I take the quotes out and search for them separately, search for things separately, that'll cover it and make sure that I catch everything.
And based on your analysis of these searches within the negative hashtags, what do the results of these searches mean?
Well, obviously I can't read what's in people's minds, but when I read the disclosure of Mr. Depp's expert, Mr. Banya, he stated that if these terms, particularly the Waldman term,
Objection hearsay.
He's an expert.
Overruled.
if these terms had shown up a lot of times in the negative hashtag tweets, then that could show that they were, paraphrasing the impetus of why people tweeted these. So I sort of adopted Mr. Banya's opinion on that and found this large number. So I agree with Mr. Depp's expert that this could show a substantial correlation.
And to what level of confidence do you hold the opinions you just provided to the jury?
To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
Thank you, Mr. Schnell. I have no further
All
questions.
right, cross-examination.
Sir, this is the first time that you've testified as an expert as in the field of statistical and forensic analysis of social media, isn't it?
I've consulted on litigation for it, but it never got to testimony. That's correct.
This is your first testimony.
Testimony, yes.
Right. And you've never been involved in a defamation case before.
That's correct.
And you're being compensated for your time here today and the work you did, correct?
Berkely Research Group is being compensated, yes.
At $600 an hour.
That's what they're getting paid.
Right. And you're aware that Mr. Depp is being sued based on allegedly defamatory statements. What are the dates of those statements?
My understanding is there was something around April 8th, I believe April 27th and June 24th, somewhere in the end of June.
Okay. And where do you understand those statements to have resided?
In the public media.
All right. in any particular article or?
I didn't consider that.
All right. So you're not offering an opinion on how widely the articles that contain those statements were read?
That's correct.
And you're not offering an opinion as to how many people actually saw the language that's been attributed to Mr. Walt?
Only a minimum number of people who could have seen it based on the tweets that referenced him.
Okay. And you don't know even where those references appear in the articles?
I'm not sure what you mean.
There are statements by Mr. Waldman that appear in articles. Do you understand that?
I do.
Do you know in what portion of the articles the statements appear?
I've looked at the articles, and from that, I've seen where they appear.
And where, in general, do they appear? In the middle, the end? What's your sense?
That I'm not sure of. I mean, the ones I looked at on the 6th and 7th, I think they were towards the top.
All right. So you testified that you reviewed a number of hashtags that you deemed were negative towards Ms. Heard. That's right?
Yes.
Yeah. And the four you picked, at least the negative ones, Justice for Johnny Depp, that's one of them, right?
That's right.
Amber Heard is an abuser. That's one of them.
That is one of them.
We just don't like you, Amber. That's one of them.
That is one of them.
And the last one was Amber Turd, right?
That is another one.
Okay. And these four hashtags you identified and searched for, you don't believe they have any connection, or you testified that you have no connection to these three Waldman statements. The hashtags aren't connected to Waldman, right?
Well, I did an additional analysis that did show how many of those had Waldman connected to them, and I found that 1 out of 4 of them did.
Right. But when you were deposed, you were asked whether these were related, these particular hashtags were related to any of the Waldman statements, and you said no at that time.
I said more than that. I said I didn't know, and then I said I'm basing I'm looking at Mr. Banya's opinion where he says they would be if they were in large number, and I'm adopting his opinion and agreeing with him that they must be connected.
So you're adopting an opinion that hasn't been rendered in this case yet by anybody but you.
Well, I know that Mr. Banya
has testified.
Okay, what I'm saying is I know that Mr. Banya's disclosure says that he is expected to come to that opinion.
All right. But the only person who's ever expressed this opinion today in this courtroom is you, correct?
I would know. I haven't watched everything. I've watched a bit.
So
but
you're adopting your own opinion.
No, I'm adopting the opinion that I read in Mr. Banya's disclosure.
And that's not the opinion you had during your deposition.
I think I did make reference in my deposition to what Mr. Banya said, and that I agreed with it.
All right. And you indicated in deposition you didn't take into account statements made in the media, correct?
Made in what? I couldn't.
You said you did not take into account in your analysis statements made in the media. Yes, in the analysis where I gathered data and decided which data to gather, I did not take into account statements in the media. All right. So you looked at data, you produced charts, you did analysis relating to the data, but you had no reason at the time you did this to consider any particular statements. Isn't that true?
That's true. I think that's an appropriate scientific methodology to first gather as much data as possible and then drill down on the data.
All right. And the Twitter data you collected shows that the 4 hashtags you identified were in existence before Mr. Waldman made the first statement in April 2020, right?
That's correct.
Right.
In very small number.
But Justice for Johnny Depp has been around since 2013, correct?
That sounds correct.
Yeah. Amber Heard is an abuser, and Amber Turd first appeared in 2016, correct?
I don't recall, actually.
Right. Do you recall if there was any portion of Mr. Waldman's statement that made any reference to Amber Turd?
Not that I've seen.
Right. People can form a negative view of Ms. Heard without reading Mr. Waldman's statements, correct?
People can form a negative opinion of anyone without reading anything. That's correct.
And you didn't consider whether there was negative publicity around Ms. Heard other than the Waldman statements?
Well, what I did was to report on correlation with these hashtags and certain search terms in particular. I wasn't trying to read anyone's mind as to why they used them.
You didn't form any opinion that of the million plus tweets that you looked at, were connected in some way to Mr. Waldman's statements.
I did eventually, yes.
You did eventually after you read somebody else's report relative to testimony that hasn't been given here.
Well, I did it before my deposition.
All right. You have a demonstrative that counsel played for you. Can we put up plaintiff's 1901 again? This is yours, right?
Correct.
Yeah. The biggest spikes, by far the biggest spikes here, are attributable to what hashtag?
Justice for Johnny Depp hashtag.
Yeah. And there are spikes that existed considerably before Mr. Waldman's statement. You were asked about that by counsel?
One of them did. That was the date that Mr. Waldman leaked the audio tape.
The biggest spike was before the statements.
Right, the date he leaked the audio.
And then there were many statements that, or there are many hashtags, or uses of the hashtag, that follow the statements.
You'll have to be more specific.
Well, so you looked at 1.2 million of these hashtags, right?
Right.
In your chart, didn't 980,000 of these plus belong to Justice for Johnny Depp?
That sounds about right. You'd have to show me, but I'll take your word for it.
All right. But the vast majority of them were Justice for Johnny Depp.
A majority of them were.
Well, it wasn't the majority so large that you had to draw another chart?
The reason for drawing another chart is because the numbers were high at particular points, so you wouldn't be able to see the other hashtags.
Right. Literally, this is your chart, and all of the other activity at the bottom you can barely see in comparison to the hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp.
Right. As I testified, you can barely see them because of the spikes in the Justice for Johnny Depp hashtag, but when you look at the other chart, you can see that those others are still very large numbers.
So you're not offering any opinion as to what caused these spikes?
That's correct.
Right. So you're not opining as to why these spikes are there?
I'm only talking about correlation.
Right. You're talking about a mathematical connection.
That's right.
Right. And you don't purport to be in anybody's head such that you know why they did a particular post with a particular hashtag.
That's correct.
All right. There's a second spike that appears to be in July of 2020.
Yes, the pointer was pointing to a different one, but yes.
Yeah. Were you aware there was a trial in the UK in 2020?
I'm aware.
And in July?
You're saying it was in July?
No, but as of the time of that spike, there was publicity around a trial, correct?
I don't know how much publicity there was. I know the trial was going on then.
All right. There are a number of things called out in your chart relative to particular dates, December 17th, February 11th, February 14th. You see all those?
I do.
And your chart makes absolutely no reference to and does not identify the dates of any of the Waldman statements, does it, sir?
No, it doesn't call those out, if that's what you're asking.
It calls out a whole bunch of other dates, but nothing relative to the Waldman statements.
Correct.
All right. All right. At some point, you ran searches for additional search terms: hoax, fraud. I think you said fake. And then you don't know why those terms appeared, do you?
I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Are you asking me?
You could not perform a scientific analysis of the reason why those terms appeared in the tweets you were looking at.
Right. I could only show mathematical correlation.
Right. You could show a correlation, but you don't have any idea why they're there.
I can't get into people's heads.
Right. And just because the tweet contains one of the terms does not mean the tweet was in some way prompted by Mr. Walt, right?
Well, there are a few things I searched for. The ones you just mentioned, and then the Waldman and Waldman-Young terms. So, it's not that big a stretch to say that it's related to Mr. Waldman if it's his name and Waldman-Young or Minion.
Wait a minute, is the new standard it's not that big a stretch?
No.
All right,
I'm trying to speak. I'm trying to
certainty, right?
Yes.
All right. So you're not suggesting that you know why Mr. Waldman's name appeared in any of these tweets?
Well, if you look at the tweets that have Waldman-Young, and I looked at a large sample of them.
Just a large sample was 2,000 out of 1,000,002.
No, I looked at more than that of these. But that's another thing that I wouldn't expect to be in controversy. When people are saying that they're part of the Wald minions or things like that, I would expect everybody to agree without arguing that it has to do with Mr. Waldman.
And nobody asked whether it had to do with Mr. Waldman. I'm wondering, how do you know that it had anything to do with Mr. Waldman's statements?
But I was under the impression, I was informed that nobody really knew who Mr. Waldman was before all of this. So I wouldn't expect it to be anything else. I didn't think it was in controversy.
It wasn't in controversy whether everyone knew who Mr. Waldman was? Is that your testimony?
No, I'm saying it wasn't in controversy that if somebody was suddenly talking about him, that it had to do with this case.
But again, it's not, did it have to do with this case? It's, did it have to do with the allegedly defamatory statements? You have no idea, do you, sir?
I can't get into anyone's mind. I can only talk about the science of it.
Right. And so you identified all of these hashtags as negative towards Miss Heard, right?
Right.
Justice for Johnny Depp is not negative towards Miss Heard, is it?
No, but the tweets that use that hashtag are.
No, but the hashtag itself, the hashtag that predominates through your analysis is not, in fact, negative towards Miss Heard.
I'm not opining on the hashtag itself. I'm talking about the tweets that contain that hashtag.
But the hashtag itself is not negative.
That's not part of my opinion, one way or the other.
Do you have an opinion as to whether justice for Johnny Depp is a good thing?
It's not part of my assignment.
Okay. But you'll agree with me, justice in general is a good thing?
Big fan of justice.
All right, me too. No further questions.
All right, redirect. Okay, yes, sir.
Mr. Schnell, you reviewed a large sampling of tweets of justice for Johnny Depp, correct?
I did.
And the tweets that had the hashtag justice for Johnny Depp, how many of them were negative toward Miss Heard?
All of them.
Okay. And what percentage of the tweets with negative hashtags between April 2020 and January 31st, 2021 contain the terms Waldman or Waldman-Young?
Overruled, Allah.
Over 25%. 1 out of 4.
And in your analysis, how far in time did the tweets containing the terms Waldman or Waldmignon go? Like how far to now?
Well,
Beyond the scope of cross?
He was asking about.
Overruled.
So I think I disclosed at my deposition that I looked further into 2022 and found that it continued to go on. I didn't see any end to it at all.
And based on your analysis, again, what period of time had more negative tweets against Ms. Heard, before or after April 2020?
It was clearly double as many from April to 2021.
And that's even including the February 2020 spike, correct?
That's right. So and that happened before April, obviously. So even if you put that in there, it's still a lot more after April of 2020. And there are fewer months in that time period. I think there are 15 months in that time period and 27 months in the first part.
And based on your analysis, what, if any, end do you see to the negative tweets toward Ms. Heard?
Objection, no foundation.
Based on his analysis up until the time?
I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. Did you see any, based on your analysis, at the end of the time of your analysis, what was happening with the negative tweets toward Ms. Heard?
To continue to go on.
Okay. Mr. Schnell, after your cross-examination, have any of your opinions in this matter changed?
No, they've not.
Thank you.
All right, so you can have a seat in the courtroom or you're free to go. Okay, sir? Thank you. All right, your next witness? Okay, sure.
Thank you, Your Honor. We will be calling Michelle Mulroney by deposition designation and restart.
Okay. Just give us a moment.
Will you?
All right, you just want to spell the last name for me?
It's Mulrooney.
All right. Okay.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Michelle Mulroney, Los Angeles, California, 90067.
Ms. Mulroney, what is your occupation?
I'm a partner at Venable LLP, an attorney practice.
Could you just please describe give me a brief description of your educational background and work history?
Okay, I attended USC and received my undergraduate degree in 1982. And then I again attended USC and received my law degree in 1985. I then worked for Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher until 1991. And then I worked for an entertainment law firm that was originally called Armstrong Hirsch. When I joined it, then later morphed into several names. And then in 2011, I joined Venable LLP as a partner.
Thank you. What are your areas of practice and expertise?
I'm head of the estate planning, the West Coast estate planning group for Venable.
And does that estate planning involve any aspect of marital estate planning, such as things like prenups and postnups, prenuptials, postnuptials?
Yes, we frequently do prenups, cohabitation, and postnup agreements for.
Would you please briefly describe what a prenuptial and a postnuptial is?
A prenuptial agreement is where spouses contract on the economics of their marriage before they are married, and they discuss things as the nature, and they contract the things as the nature of the property, community separate, etc., and also things like spousal support. And in a postnup, the clients do that after they're married. They contract on the same issues.
Do you regularly represent actors?
Yes.
I'm asking very narrowly, did there come a time when Amber Heard contacted you for representation respecting a prenup or a postnup agreement?
At some point, I was contacted about an Amber Heard prenup.
Ms. Mulroney, I'm going to show you what has been marked as exhibit number 3, and it's an email from you to a Dana Lowry. Do you know who Dana Lowry is?
Yes.
And could you please tell us who Dana Lowry is?
She's a family law attorney practicing in Los Angeles.
And this is dated Monday, February 2, 2015, and says, I look forward to working with you. Please send me, this is from you, please send me the bullet points for the economics of the deal. When you are back in the office tomorrow, I will have Amber's business manager get her financial information to me ASAP. I also like to exchange 2 years of tax returns, but not attach them. Is this your general practice? Let me know. Thanks. Who did Dana Lowry represent?
Johnny Depp.
I take it Amber in the actual document is Amber Heard, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if I just direct your attention to the top of the email where it says February 2, 2015, what, if anything, does this do to refresh your recollection on when approximately you were contacted about representing Amber Heard in connection with the prenup?
It makes the approximate date more clear to me.
Okay. And based on this, when approximately were you contacted to represent Amber Heard in connection with the prenup or postnup?
The early part of February, the late part of January, or the early part of February 2015.
Ms. Mulroney, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 4. And it is an email from you to Dana Lowry, which is Mr. Depp's counsel, correct?
During this time period, correct.
And it's dated Tuesday, February 3. And I'm going to scroll down first so we get the earliest part of it. And the first part of it is an email from Dana Lowry to you, dated February 3rd at 10:13, and says J/A deal points. Do you know what J/A means? I'm going to take you, first of all, to the bottom part, which is the J/deal points. Do you have an understanding of what J/A means?
I believe it means Johnny/Amber deal points.
Absent a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement, is California what we call a common law property state?
No,
What is it?
it's a community property state.
Okay, and what does that mean?
Generally means that all earnings after the date of marriage are owned 50. Each party has an undivided 50% interest in those earnings. Yes.
What was your understanding of the purpose of the confidentiality agreement?
It's very standard when you're doing a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement, when either party is disclosing their assets, that they ask for a confidentiality agreement.
You respond on February 17, Dana, I have forwarded to Amber. She is filming a movie, but hope to connect with her by the end of the week. I will keep trying to move forward. I'm asking you what you meant by I will keep trying to move forward.
I assume I meant that we're trying to get a postnuptial agreement signed between the parties, and that's what I was hired for.
To show you what has been marked as exhibit number 7. And I'm going to start again with going down to show you where the stream is here. And it says, I'll read, on February 17, that's the same email we've seen a couple times now, where she's attaching the confidentiality agreement, telling that she'll have a draft post-nup agreement, but she's getting the signed confidentiality agreement first. And then I'm going to direct your attention to the very top part, and that is Wednesday, February 18. And it's from you to Dana Lowry, and it says, Amber is sending the signed confidentiality agreement to me. I assume I will receive all the underlying financials and a list of anticipated future revenue streams and documentation pertaining thereto. Now, what did you mean by underlying financials and a list of anticipated future revenue streams and documentation pertaining thereto?
I mean, this is typical for an actor. They have profit participations, back ends. I wanted to have a list of what his future revenue would be. He might have had movies booked that he would render services after marriage. I just wanted to see the pro bono.
What did you mean by back ends?
Back end is either profit participation or royalties. Sometimes it's box office bonuses. You just have to look at the underlying agreement on each movie, TV show, etc., to track what the revenue will be from each project.
And why is that relevant?
I want to know what they're going to make during the marriage. I want to know the income during the marriage.
And those are all components of what they make during the marriage?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then you said, I can't really comment on the document until I get this information. What document were you referring to there?
The post-nup agreement that I anticipated she would send.
How much time expired between when you were sent the confidentiality agreement for Amber Heard to sign and when you indicated back to counsel for Mr. Depp that Amber is sending the signed confidentiality agreement to you?
The next day.
What, if any, communication did you receive from Mr. Depp in connection with the post-nup agreement?
I received one telephone call.
And whom did you receive that telephone call from?
Mr. Depp.
Please describe the telephone call from Mr. Depp.
My recollection is that he was very mean, that he called me names, and that he fired me on behalf of them.
When you say that he was very mean, what did you mean?
Well, my only exact recollection is he called me a bitch.
Mr. Depp called you a bitch on that telephone call?
Hearsay, leaving.
What, if any, observations did you make during the telephone call from Mr. Depp, during which time he called you a bitch?
I thought he was under the influence.
Why did you think that?
He was slurring his words, and his speech pattern was similar to my children's speech pattern when they were under the influence. I was just extremely rattled by the call. I was on the phone for a very short time with him because he was represented by counsel, and I didn't want to be rude and hang up, but I told him I had to hang up. Like after 2 or 3 minutes after I realized what was happening, it took me very off guard, and that's all I remember is that it really shook me up.
After that phone call, did you perform any further services for Ms. Heard in connection with the postnuptial agreement?
No.
Do you recall ever seeing a postnuptial draft agreement?
No.
Has either Ms. Heard or Mr. Depp contacted you at any time after the call with Mr. Depp respecting pursuing a postnuptial agreement?
No.
Who, if anyone, was paying your legal services?
I don't recall.
Was it your understanding that Mr. Depp had the authority to fire you?
No.
Did you tell him that?
I don't recall.
And isn't it true that he wouldn't have had the authority to fire you even if he weren't paying for your legal services? True?
True.
What, if any, communications did you have with Dana Lully about your conversation with Mr. Depp after the conversation with Mr. Depp?
I don't recall specifically.
What do you recall generally, if anything?
I do recall that I told her that I was no longer representing her. But I don't know if I did that in writing. Somehow she knew.
But and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you testified that Mr. Depp did not have the authority to fire you, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Mulroney, when did your attorney-client relationship with Ms. Heard relating to a potential postnuptial agreement terminate?
Shortly after that phone call.
When you say shortly after that phone call, can you give us a time frame of how long it was after the phone call?
Within a few days, could be one.
He didn't have the power to fire you, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any recollection of ever receiving any more communications from Dana Lowry furthering the postnuptial agreement after Johnny Depp called you and told you he was firing you on behalf of Amber and called you names?
No substantive, I recall that there was no more substantive conversations.
Is there any question in your mind that it was Mr. Depp who called you?
No.
All right. Yes, ma'am, your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, we'd like to call the Disney corporate representative.
All right.
Would you please state your name and your business address for the record?
Tina Newman, Walt Disney Studios Motion Picture Production, Live Action, 500 South Buena Vista Street, Burbank, California, 91521.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm a production executive.
And what is your job title?
That is my title, production executive. I work in the live action feature division for Disney.
Is it your understanding you're testifying on behalf of Walt Disney Motion Pictures Group?
Yes.
Were you involved in the gathering of the documents responsive to the documents subpoenaed to Disney?
Yes, I did provide some documentation to Alec and his group from our production group.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at what I've just highlighted under topic number, it's subpoena ducus tecum, paragraph number 2. And it asks for documents relating to this case, in fact, and then it also says specifically, this specifically includes the op-ed by Ms. Heard and any impact it may have had on the above. And that includes, as it's defined above, including the business relationship with Mr. Depp, including considering Mr. Depp for any work with Disney or future Pirates of the Caribbean role, a lesser or greater role, a different role, or a different production. Do you recall seeing in any of the documents you reviewed, either being involved as the corporate designee or in preparing as the corporate designee, do you recall seeing an op-ed written by Ms. Heard?
No.
Do you recall in your preparation as the corporate designee of Disney and your review of the documents that were produced by Disney, any document that referred in any manner to the op-ed written by Ms. Heard?
I would say no.
Do you remember seeing in any of the documents you reviewed that were produced by Disney in response to the subpoena ducus tecum, the word op-ed in any of those documents?
I don't recall that, no.
Did you have any discussions with anyone at Disney about any future Pirates of the Caribbean role, a lesser or greater role, a different role, or a different production?
No.
Did you have any discussions with anyone at Disney about the impact of the op-ed by Ms. Heard on the relationship between Disney and Mr. Depp, including considering Mr. Depp for any work with Disney and future Pirates of the Caribbean role, a lesser or greater role, a different role, or a different production?
No.
Do you know whether Mr. Depp is being considered for a role in Pirates 6?
No.
And when you say no, I think I have to probably ask clarification. Does that mean you don't know one way or the other, or he is not being considered?
I don't know one way or the other. It doesn't fall.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that decision doesn't fall within my job responsibility. It's above my head. It's the best way to say it.
So what is the knowledge you have about Pirates 6?
Like I said, I just know that it's a project that's possibly in development at the studio. That's it.
Do you know whether anyone at Disney has ever even read the op-ed written by Ms. Heard?
No.
Are you aware of anyone else at Disney who has knowledge of the topic areas in the deposition notice, that's deposition exhibit number 2, that beyond what you know?
I can't honestly say. I can't speak for someone else. Like I explained earlier, my knowledge and what my job functionality is at the studio plateaus, and there are people that I work under, and those particular persons may or may not have more knowledge, but I can't speak on behalf of them.
Is Disney aware that Mr. Depp has testified under oath that he would not take another Pirates of the Caribbean franchise role for $300 million and 1 million alpacas?
No.
Would Disney entertain paying Mr. Depp more than $300 million and provide him with more than 1 million alpacas to be able to obtain his services for any future Pirates of the Caribbean role?
No.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 52 to Alan Horn. Who's that?
He was our co-chairman.
Of Disney?
Yes.
And Alan Bergman, who's he?
Same. He's the other co-chairman of Disney, or was at the time.
And then Sean Bailey, you indicated, was the president?
It's our president of production, correct.
Okay, and then Ricky Strauss, who's he?
I believe at the time he was the head of our marketing group.
And Paul Rader?
Paul Rader is the head of communications.
All right, and this is from Angela Shaw, and it's dated 5/10/2017. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it says, subject HR, Johnny Depp, a star in crisis, and the insane story of his missing millions. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any understanding as to why Angela Shaw was sending this communication to this group, the 2 co-chairmen, the president, vice president of production, head of communications on this particular day?
I don't know what the intent of the email is, but obviously we have a relationship as a company with Johnny, so I assume that's why she may be bringing it to their attention.
All right, and just to take that a little bit further, given that Disney has a relationship with Johnny Depp, if there is publicity relating to Johnny Depp, whether it be positive or negative, that would be relevant to Disney, would it not?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say how it's relevant to Disney, but given that Angela is part of communications, it's her job to, keep the studio abreast, I guess, of anything concerning the company. So that's about as far as I can read into it.
Okay. And so that's your interpretation of why Angela Shaw sent this to that group of people, was to keep them apprised of this particular article on Johnny Depp. Would you agree?
Yeah, that would be my assumption.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been labeled as exhibit number 53, and it is Disney 114 through 137. And I'm going to ask you if you recognize this document.
Well, it looks like an internal email. It may have been part of the disclosure documents.
This one's from Alan Horn, and I think we've identified Alan Horn before. Well, actually, it starts with, let's start down here. On June 21st, 2018, all right? And then it has a reply from Sean Bailey, sad. Do you see that?
Yes.
What was Mr. Bailey's position with Disney on June 21st, 2018?
I believe he was the president then.
Okay.
He may have been the EVP. I don't know.
Okay. And then we have an email at the top. It's to Sean Bailey, CC Janelle Tipton. And then it has some copies to some other people. It's from Alan Horn. I believe we said he was one of the co-directors. Is that correct?
Co-chairman.
Co-chairman. Okay. And Alan Bergman.
The other co-chairman.
Okay. And do you have any recollection of ever reading the Rolling Stones article about Johnny Depp back in this time frame?
I honestly don't remember if I ever read this document. I may have.
Do you have any understanding of why this would be sent from Alan Horn to these other individuals on the top?
Again, same as before, just because of the fact that we have a relationship with Johnny. So they may have determined it was important to bring it to their attention.
All right, Ms. Newman, I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 54. And do you recognize this document?
Yes, it looks like a email.
Please describe it for me.
It's an email, well, it started from Scott to myself. Scott Sellers is in Post Finance. And then I replied to Scott. So it looks like an email exchange between the two of us.
All right. And you said Scott Sellers is in Post Finance?
Correct.
What is that?
He handles all finances once film goes into post-production on any given picture. Also reporting for the studio, internal reporting, finances.
All right. And this is July 14, 2018 that he's sending this to you, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall reading the story that was in the Rolling Stone, The Trouble with Johnny Depp?
I mean, to be honest, I don't really remember much about the story, but obviously I must have looked at it and commented.
Right, and in fact, you commented depressing. Do you see that?
Yes.
And just to go back to refreshing your recollection on the template, do you see that it has importance and received on this when you sent it back?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Newman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 56. And it is a document also produced by Disney, and there's the date stamps, Disney 167 through 177. And I'm going to ask you to take a look at the top there. This is to Alan Bergman from, and it has THR's Today and Entertainment. Do you understand what that is?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to turn down to 169. It says, Johnny Depp's legal team prepares for court hearing about Amber Heard abuse claims. The actor's camp is previewing the evidence that it will present in an upcoming court hearing in the UK this fall, tied to a defamation lawsuit against the Sun for an article that labeled the actor a, quote, wife beater, unquote. Katie Kaleni reports. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you have a recollection of learning about this and reading about the UK case in this time frame? We're talking October 2018.
I may have seen a headline come across my desk in the same manner as Alan received it, but that's probably as far as it went.
Ms. Newman, I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition number 60. And it's dated November 5, 2020. And it says Disney reportedly scraps plans for Depp's POTC 6. I'm assuming that's Pirates of the Caribbean 6 return. You see that? Question was, did you see it?
Yes, I see it.
As you sit here today, are you aware of any document in Disney's emails or in their IT system or anywhere that contains Amber Heard's op-ed from December of 2018?
I mean, no, not that I'm aware.
Okay. Are you aware of any decision maker within Disney who has ever said they are not casting Johnny Depp in Pirates 6 or any other role because of Amber Heard's op-ed?
No.
Are you aware of any decision maker outside of Disney? And by this, I'm including producers, directors, people of that ilk, who have ever said they were not considering Mr. Depp for Pirates 6 or any other movie because of Amber Heard's op-ed from December 2018?
No.
All right. Do we? How much time is it?
We have an 11-minute one.
Okay, that's fine. What's your next witness?
Ellen Barkin,
All right.
B-A-R-K-I-N.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Barkin.
Good morning.
I think the first thing that would be very short but very simple and clean for the record is if you could just describe kind of your career background. I know it's very lengthy, but just give a kind of brief summary of kind of when you started working and what you've done during your career.
I started acting professionally about 26 or 7. And I did theater, television, movies, lots of them. That's what I did for 40 years.
In the course of your career acting in theater, television, movies, etc., did you come to meet a person by the name of Johnny Depp?
Yes.
Can you specify in time, Ms. Barkin, when you met him?
I would say 1990.
And upon or after meeting him, did there come a time when you became friends?
Yes.
And can you describe how that happened?
We just developed a friendship over time that lasted, I guess, if we met in the 90s, maybe 10 years, a little less.
And fair to say that Mr. Depp at the time was also an actor, a professional actor?
Yes.
Did you act in any film, stage, or TV productions with Mr. Depp?
Yes, I was in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
How often would you see Mr. Depp?
When I lived in New York, usually whenever I go to LA, if I were in LA, I'd see him once a week, maybe more. I mean, the friendship went up and down, living on different coasts.
And did there come a time when your friendship with Mr. Depp became more than that, became romantic in nature?
Yes.
And at what point in time did your relationship with Mr. Depp take a romantic turn?
After I had moved to Hollywood, And he, switched the buttons.
Recall what year you moved to Hollywood?
Yes, 1994.
When you say switch the buttons, can you tell me what you meant by that?
The friendship went from a purely platonic friendship to a romantic one.
At that point in 1994, when the relationship turned romantic, to your knowledge,
change that to sexual.
To sexual.
Thank you.
For how long did your relationship with Mr. Depp remain sexual?
Several months. Anywhere between 3 and 5, 6.
And during that period, how often would you see Mr. Depp? That period when it was sexual?
I'd say I'd see him 3 or 4 times a week.
And again, I'm not looking to pry into private details, but can you tell me like where you would see him? Just give me some sense of that.
Yeah, he would come to my house, or I would go to his house.
And both houses in LA?
Yes, about 10-minute drive apart from each other.
And at either when you were at his house, where you didn't stay the night, or where you were at his house when you did stay the night, were there other people in the house who saw you there? Who would those people be?
He had an assistant. His sister. That's all I can remember now.
Do you recall the name of the assistant?
I don't know his name. He was referred to as Pig.
He was referred to by whom as Pig?
Johnny Depp.
At any point that you were either initially friends and then sexual with Mr. Depp, did you become aware that he drank to excess?
I was always aware.
Okay, and can you explain how you were aware of that?
He was drunk all the time, a lot of the time.
And that would apply both to when you were initially friends and then later when it became sexual?
Yeah.
And what was he drunk? What with your understanding, what had he drunk to become drunk?
He was a red wine drinker.
Okay. In addition to alcohol, were you aware at that time that Mr. Depp was taking any prescription medication?
No.
Okay. Same question, Mr. Barkin, for illegal substances.
Yes.
Same question. And what illegal substances?
Hallucinogenics, cocaine, marijuana.
Hallucinogenics? Can you say specifically what those were?
I don't really know. He called me and told me he was tripping.
With respect to any of that, hallucinogenics, cocaine, or marijuana, did he do any of that in your presence?
Yes.
More than once?
All the time.
When you say all the time, how many times, again, in the period that you were both first friends and sexual, then sexual with Mr. Depp, do you think you saw him?
I couldn't even tell you. I mean, I just know he was always drinking or smoking a joint.
But would it be fair to say more than at least dozens of times?
Yeah. Over the full course, oh yeah.
Now, did you ever observe, Ms. Barkin, Mr. Depp's behavior change when he drank more or used more drugs?
I did not.
So he was kind of the same all the time, fair to say?
It was not the same. He was high.
Did there come a time, Ms. Barkin, when Mr. Depp acted in a way that was out of control with you?
Yes. Mr. Depp threw a wine bottle across the room, the hotel room on one instance in Las Vegas while we were shooting Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Was something about to happen?
A fight was going on.
Between you and Mr. Depp?
No.
Who was the fight between?
Between Johnny Depp and his friends in the room, the assistant. Honestly, I don't remember.
And the bottle that, do you remember sitting here today, Ms. Barkin, whether the bottle was full of wine or empty?
I don't.
Sitting here today, Ms. Barkin, do you remember whether the bottle hit you?
No, it did not.
Did the bottle hit anyone else?
No, it did not.
Approximately how far away from you was Mr. Depp when he threw the bottle?
Across the room, so maybe by that break in the table or a little further down. It was a toss.
And sitting here today, if the bottle had hit you, would it have injured you? Ms. Barkin, was it your understanding back then that he was throwing the bottle at you?
I don't know why he threw the bottle.
And when he threw it, was it in your direction?
Yes.
Were there other people standing around you?
Yes.
So he threw it in your direction at a group of people?
Yes.
Whose hotel room was it?
His, Johnny Depp's.
Who broke off?
He did.
How did it come about that Mr. Depp broke off your relationship?
I went to go home. There was a big goodbye, crying, a lot of jealous, and don't do this, don't do that. And I never heard from him again after that.
And did Mr. Depp not want you to go back to Los Angeles at the time?
Yes, he didn't want me to go. I was only supposed to be there for 2 days. I stayed for longer.
And you just referenced, you just used the word jealous. How did that come up? What did he say that indicated to you that he was jealous?
He's just a jealous man, controlling. Where are you going? Who are you going with? What did you do last night? I had a scratch on my back once that got him very, very angry because he insisted it came from me having sex with a person who wasn't him.
During the time that you were in a sexual relationship with Mr. Depp, was it common for him to say things to you about being controlling, to use your words, or being jealous of you?
Yeah, very common.
And in these instances, when Mr. Depp became jealous or controlling, did he also become angry?
Yeah, and demanding.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go and take our afternoon recess. Please do not discuss the case and do not do any outside research, okay? We'll see you back in 15 minutes. All right, we'll come back at 3:45. Does that give you time to be ready? Okay, all right, 3:45.